Hi, this is Dan Miller with the National Weather Service office in Columbia, South Carolina, and welcome to this presentation on the new climate normals, a comparison of the 1991 to 2020 climatological normals with the 1981 to 2010 climatological normals, focusing on Columbia, South Carolina, and Augusta, Georgia. What do I mean by climate normals? I'm referring to things like the normal daily high, the normal daily low for a given date, the normal monthly precipitation for a given month, etc. Here's an example of some climate products that we issue routinely. On the left, a daily climate summary for Columbia for a particular day, and on the right, a monthly climate summary, in this case for Columbia for the month of April. We give the observed values, and we also compare them to normal. And where do these normals come from? Like the normal average temperature for a month, or the normal amount of precipitation that we typically get in that month. Where do they come from? They're calculated by using actual weather observations that are taken over a 30-year period of time. The World Meteorological Organization in Geneva, Switzerland, established the 30-year time period standard for normals early in the 20th century, back when most locations across the world only had about 30 years worth of continuous weather observations. This 30-year data set is updated every 10 years. Up until very recently, we were still using the 1981 to 2010 climate normals, using observations taken during that 30-year period of time. And just recently, we jettisoned the 1981 to 1990 observations and brought in the weather observations from the most recent decade, and we now have a new 30-year data set that covers 1991 through 2020, and so we have new climate normals. And 10 years from now, we'll update it to cover the period 2001 to 2030, and those will be released in 10 years from now in 2031. So what are climate normals used for? Well, they're used for a variety of different things. They can be used in forecasting. They can be used to compare the climate from one location to another. They can identify trends in climatological normals at any given location in time. And there's a multitude of different industry and personal uses for these for this information. A little background: just recently, earlier this month, the National Centers for Environmental Information, headquartered in Asheville, North Carolina, recently released the 1991 to 2020 climatological normal data set for the U.S., replacing the previous data set. And so what has changed with the new normals? We'll take a look at how the average annual temperature and precipitation amounts have changed over the continental U.S. We'll take a look more specifically at climate statistics for Columbia, South Carolina, and Augusta, Georgia. And we'll also talk about new tropical cyclone normals for the Atlantic Basin. So what has changed? Well, as far as the U.S. annual average temperature is concerned, it's trended warmer for most of the continental U.S., except for the northern plains and upper Midwest, where it trended slightly cooler. For U.S. annual average precipitation amounts, it trended wetter for much of the north and east, but trended significantly drier from the central and southern plains westward across the Rockies and desert southwest. For both Columbia and Augusta, we trended warmer and wetter for annual average temperature and precipitation amounts, and we saw a slight increase in the number of named tropical cyclones and hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin. Here's a graphic showing the annual mean temperature change with the new set of normals. Most of the country is painted in this orange shade, which shows that it trended warmer, except for the northern plains and upper Midwest, where it actually stayed about the same or trended a little cooler in some locations. As far as annual precipitation amounts, the areas shaded in green showed an increase in precipitation amounts, and you can see the green shading across the north and across much of the east, but especially from West Texas westward across the Rockies and desert southwest, it trended considerably drier. For Columbia, South Carolina, this is a list of the calendar months and the average temperatures for each month using the 1981 to 2010 normals, and we also have a listing of the new 1991 to 2020 normals in this column, and then the difference in this column, and we also have the annual average down here at the bottom. For Columbia, 10 out of the 12 months trended higher on the average monthly temperature. June saw no change, and we actually trended cooler for the month of November. For the year, the average annual temperature trended up from 63.9 degrees to 64.3 degrees. That's a trend upward of 0.4 degrees Fahrenheit. For Augusta, Georgia, there was a greater increase in temperature observed there. Pretty considerable increase in most of the months, and the average annual temperature trended 1.5 degrees higher. For the precipitation, there is a mixture of months at Columbia where it may have trended a little drier, and some months where it trended a little wetter. For the year as a whole, the average amount of precipitation per year trended higher from 44.59 inches up to 45.24. That's an increase of 0.65 inches. Augusta, similar story. Some months were a little drier, some months were a little wetter. And for the year, we trended higher, increasing from 43.57 inches up to 44.09 inches. That's a 0.52 inch increase. The annual number of days reaching 100 degrees or higher has trended up as well. At Columbia, it trended up from 5.2 days up to 6.0 days. And at Augusta, it trended up from 5.5 days up to 5.9. The annual number of days in which we hit 90 degrees or higher trended up considerably. At Columbia, we went up from 71.6 days up to 80.9 days. That's a difference of 9.3 days more. And at Augusta, we trended higher from 82.0 to 86.3 days. On the cool side, the annual number of days in which we hit 32 degrees or lower trended down slightly. At Columbia, down from 47.3 to 46.5 days. And at Augusta, a slight decrease from 51.3 days on average to now an average of 51.0 days per year. In terms of annual snowfall amount, there was a slight downward trend as well. At Columbia, trending down from 1.5 inches down to 1.2 inches, and at Augusta, a slight decrease from an average of 0.9 inches per year down to 0.8 inches. The average date of the first fall freeze, using the 1981 to 2010 data set, the average date in the fall in which Columbia had their first low temperature of 32 degrees or lower was November the 3rd. With the new data set, it's now 4 days later, November the 7th. At Augusta, it's also 4 days later, trending from November the 5th to now November the 9th. And then in the spring, the average date of the last spring freeze, we trended 5 days earlier in Columbia, going from March the 30th back to March 25th. And at Augusta, we trended 6 days earlier from March the 29th back to now March 23rd. As far as the tropical cyclones are concerned, the average number of named storms trended up from 12 to 14 per year. Named storms means a tropical cyclone that has achieved tropical storm status or higher. As far as hurricanes are concerned, the average number of hurricanes trended up from 6 up to 7 per year now. But the number of major hurricanes stayed unchanged, an average of 3 major hurricanes per year. Major hurricane means that hurricane has reached category 3 or higher on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale. So in summary, we saw U.S. annual average temperatures trend warmer for most of the continental U.S. We saw U.S. annual average precipitation amounts trend wetter for much of the north and east, but drier from the central and southern plains westward across the Rockies and desert southwest. For both Columbia and Augusta, we saw a trend towards warmer and wetter values for annual average temperature and precipitation amounts, and we saw a slight increase in the number of named tropical cyclones and hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin. Please note that for record values, such as daily record highs, daily record lows, record monthly precipitation amounts, and so on, the record values still use the entire period of record, not just that 30-year data set. We have continuous temperature and precipitation records for both Columbia and Augusta that date back to the late 1800s. So thank you very much for viewing this presentation on the new climate normals. If you have any comments or feedback or questions, please feel free to email me at daniel.miller@noaa.gov. Thank you very much.